The Hernia Mesh Lawsuit update. We have some pretty big updates that you're going to tell us about. But first, why don't you just tell us what is the Hernia Mesh Lawsuit?
Hernia Mesh, there's various different lawsuits against different manufacturers. So the two biggest hernia mesh manufacturers are Bard and Covidien. We're taking those cases. There's also some smaller manufacturers of hernia mesh, including Gore and Johnson & Johnson, made some hernia mesh. Those cases are kind of winding down, so we're really focused on Bard and Covidien. But really, hernia mesh is kind of a cloth that's used to plug a hernia. It's been used for a long time, but there's been a lot of problems with it in the last 20 or so years. There's multiple different designs. They cause different problems.
Yeah, what are some of the complications that people
probably
are
the
getting?
biggest complication is infection, adhesions, and recurrence of the hernia. Those would be the three biggest. And depending on the design of the mesh,
and it's the product design that is causing the problem.
Correct. If there's more material, infection becomes more likely. If there's less material, it's not strong enough and it ruptures and you get another hernia.
So who would qualify to become a part of this lawsuit?
We need to be able to prove a couple things. That you had a particular hernia mesh, and about 80% of the hernia meshes used over the last 15 years are going to be cases that we can investigate. We need to know what hernia mesh you had, the manufacturer, and the specific type of mesh. And then if you had some sort of complication, whether it's infection or chronic pain or a recurrence, and you had some type of revision surgery, those are the cases that we're looking for.
So how does one find what manufacturer they had?
It's part of the operative report. That's our job as the lawyers. Just give us a call. We can order your medical records. So kind of the process for a person who thinks they might have a claim is they're going to call a lawyer, whether it's us or someone else.
Yeah.
And we will get your medical records, and we have to confirm that you have one of these meshes. Depending on where you are, we can get medical records back 7 years, 10 years, sometimes a little further than that, but the hospitals don't have to keep these records forever. And some people have their own records. They maintain the records, but a lot of people don't. And then once we have we can show that you had a defective mesh or a mesh that we believe had a dangerous design, or there was a failure to warn, something to that effect. And then we can show that there was an injury caused by this mesh. We'll file a lawsuit. And we're doing that in federal court in either the state of Ohio, federal court in Ohio, or Massachusetts, depending on the manufacturer.
Okay, so the other big question is that I think a lot of people want to know is the statute of limitations. Is there a time that will run out that you should file a claim?
There are various reasons you should be calling if you have a hernia mesh. Bard makes over half of the hernia mesh in the United States, about 60% probably, depending on the year. There have been several bellwether cases. That litigation has been going on for many years, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more in the updates coming up, but I think there's a potential that case could settle. You're going to want to be on file when that happens. That's the biggest thing involving the timeframes and the deadlines that you're talking about. But yes, statute of limitations is always a concern. Getting records is a concern.
So let's get into these updates. What do you have for us?
Yeah, probably the biggest update is there have been multiple bellwether trials, and bellwether trials, we've talked about these before. They're kind of test trials to show there's over 20,000 lawsuits filed in the multi-district litigation against Bard. And
so bellwether trial is a type of trial.
It's like a test trial. It's a first trial. Okay. That's the one. So everybody looks at what happens in these trials, and they're used as guidance to kind of show the plaintiffs and the defense what will happen if all these other cases go to trial.
Okay.
So there have been 3 bellwether trials in federal court. All the cases from the U.S. went to Ohio, the Southern District of Ohio, and they've done these 3 trials. And they got all the paperwork from the manufacturer, they've talked to all the witnesses, and they've had these trials. There's supposed to be a 4th trial that was supposed to start this spring. And the judge has said, we've already done the test trials, we're going to put this on hold. I don't know exactly what that means, but I can tell you some people think that is, hey, these cases should settle. The test trial period is kind of over, and either you're going to settle it, or I'm going to send these 20,000 cases back to wherever they came from.
So what have the results been from the last 3 trials?
There's actually been 4 trials. There's been 3 there and then 1 in Rhode Island State Court. The first case was a verdict for the defense, and the defense put forward something along the lines of the doctor, this was really based on what the doctor did. So that was several years ago at this point. And then the last 3 trials have been verdicts for the plaintiff. Design
Which would
defect.
be the people who are filing the claims.
Correct. So you've now had 4 trials, 3 are in federal court, 1's in state court. There's been money awarded in 3. 1 was for the defense. We think it was kind of an outlier of a case. So everybody kind of knows these are viable cases. They keep coming back. The last 3 have been for the plaintiffs.
So this is good news for the plaintiffs.
Good news for the plaintiffs. And if the cases they call it remanded, they get sent back to whatever court they would have been filed in originally. That puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the defense. They now have to defend cases in every courthouse in the United States. It's that may happen, but
Which is probably good for the plaintiff because it's giving them, a reason to settle.
Yeah, leverage. So in any personal injury case, it's whether it's a car accident or anything like that, the court process is so slow. I mean, this hernia mesh litigation has been going on for years and years and years. It's really in the favor of the defense in the beginning because time is on their side. It's so long to get to court, to get a trial, to have your day in court. But at some point that pendulum starts to swing and all the pressure starts mounting on the defense. And they've used up their 5 or 6 years of delay, and now you have verdicts and you have all these cases and you have experts that are ready to go and you have lawyers who have tried cases, and now is there a playbook to run up a whole bunch of verdicts really, really quickly at that point? And that's, I think, what the defense would be up against at this point.
And I don't think a lot of people understand that there is a group of people who are basically leading the way that these cases will unfold later on the plaintiff's side as well. What do you think the timeline is going to be for some of these cases settling? I
think there'll be a settlement within a year. But if you would have asked people that 2 years ago, would we still be going? You don't really know. But the average case in a federal multi-district litigation is 3 to 5 years. We're past the 5-year mark. The case cannot go on forever. There's too many cases out there. So that's the big news in the barred multi-district litigation is the fourth bellwether is not going forward. There's a pause. And at that point, there's only 3 things that can happen at this point. The case can settle, the case can get remanded, or some of the cases can get remanded to local court. That'll increase pressure on the defense. Or they could just pick it back up and we could do the bellwether trial maybe in the fall or something like that. I don't think that's what the judge wants.
Hernia Mesh Lawsuit is interesting to me because we talk about faulty products and holding the companies responsible. But in this case, hernia mesh is still being used, is still being sold, and there's still issues. So does this lawsuit really ever catch up? Because they're still using these faulty products.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you see kind of a lot because everyone knows if a product is taken off the market. So unless they really have to take it off the market, they're still making a ton of money on this stuff. So even though they're fighting the lawsuits every day, they're selling hernia mesh. I think sometimes you get into the scenario where you have this big business and it's a core part of their business. If they take it off the market, they lose their business, everybody loses their job. So it's run the lawsuit until you can develop a new product that can take the place of the one that's there.
But that doesn't mean it's safer.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it's safer, but it means it's different. And
Right.
we'll try this other product. And I think that's kind of what's happened with hernia mesh. There have been so many problems and they keep rolling out a new mesh and rolling out a new mesh and rolling out a new mesh. And they all have problems, or a lot of them. The majority of them have problems, and some of them have different problems.
Let's say you have a hernia today and you go to get surgery and have a hernia mesh placed. There's a possibility that, you're going to get one of these meshes still?
Yeah, and I can't give medical advice. I'm not a doctor, but you got to talk to your doctor and you should be aware of what's out there.
And maybe ask the type that they're using. Any other updates we should know about?
So that's barred. They're the biggest manufacturer. That's the Chevrolet of hernia mesh, I would say, something like that. You then have Covidien. They have maybe 10 or 20% of the market share, depending on the year. That's another litigation that started a little after the barred litigation. So it's not as far advanced.
Okay.
The federal court litigation has been going on for a couple years. And there's some lawsuits that have been filed in the state of Minnesota and the state of Massachusetts that aren't federal court lawsuits. So we're more involved in the federal court cases, but there are also state cases. And that case is really in the meat of discovery, where information is being exchanged between the parties. There's depositions ongoing. So there's more time for people who have COVIDian to file a lawsuit. That case will continue on.
And just for anyone who's watching, this might be their first video about hernia mesh. And you talked about a couple different states. It doesn't matter what state you live in. You can still file a claim.
Yeah, we take cases all over the United States, and the cases are getting consolidated into either Ohio, if it's a barred manufacturer, or Massachusetts federal court, if it's a COVIDian case. So instead of having a few cases in every federal court in the United States, they consolidate the cases, what they call it, and they take all the cases and they put them in one court so that the defense can deal with it there. The plaintiff lawyers all go to one place, and then the rulings are the same for all the plaintiffs. So it's a fairness thing as well.
So for anyone who has questions, where can they find us?
We try to keep our website updated. It's Robert King Law Firm, and we're updating that as updates come out. And those are generally updates that come right from the court, and we try to translate them into English or what normal people can understand. So we update the website regularly. We'll try to keep producing these videos as there's important updates. You can subscribe to our channel. It's not all about hernia mesh, but we'll keep putting these out every so often.
And I think you also have a booklet that you can download from our website.
Yep, the basics of hernia mesh. There's a free download that's on the website. I think we can link to it here, and you can download that. It has some of the basics of hernia mesh litigation in there.